Alrighty, everyone. So before we get into, ooh, heard a big thing of thunder outside. Wow. Anyways, before we get started on our first project, I guess you could say the steps we take to reaching the final outcome of that first project, I just want to do a simple kind of just creative exercise to get those creative juices flowing. Okay. However, although simple, it can be a little tricky. And I'm not exactly sure if you have ever done anything like this, and I hope you haven't because I want it to be a little challenging as well. And hopefully, this demonstration and these 4 boxes that I'm going to do right now in this video gives you a little bit better understanding on what I'm expecting and how to approach this assignment. I'm in Photoshop right now, so instead of me just printing this out, I have, I just opened it up in Photoshop. That's the way I could draw on it wherever I want, and then I can just erase. So it's just easier for me, and I think it's also easier for you to just see the paper. You don't really need to see my ugly face while I'm talking. So, all right, so I'm going to read the directions. Magic squares, it's called. That's this little assignment. Is it possible to represent abstract shapes with just simple shapes? Abstract concepts, with just simple shapes? Give it a try and see what you can come up with. Look at the examples below for some inspiration. Remember, there is no wrong answer, so don't be intimidated. After reading that, I reminded myself that I am going to generate a list of more words that you could potentially use within these boxes. Normally in class, we would create a list together. However, don't have the opportunity to do that, so I'll provide a list for you, and then I'll ask that you are going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then there's going to be another worksheet I'm going to post that is just a page of the boxes. So you could either print these pieces out, or you could just take a piece of scrap paper, draw a box, and then create the illustration inside of the box 6 times. Okay, we're going to do it a total of 6 times. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, 6 on another piece of paper or back, or a separate piece of paper if you do that way. But I'm going to do the first 4 myself, and hopefully that gives you a better idea of what I'm looking. So remember, we want to illustrate these concepts, so the concept of loneliness, the concept of crowded, thin, and inflated, by just using simple shapes. So I'm not going to say in one box, draw a little person. It's being a little slow. I'm just going to use my mouse. Wouldn't draw a person standing there by himself. Okay? That would be the incorrect to do this assignment. We are doing simple shapes, just very simple shapes. So what I mean by that is, one way to represent loneliness is I could create like a group of circles over here, right? So you could imagine like this is a bunch of people hanging out, and then boop, one little loner over there. So that is one way I could represent loneliness with just simple shapes. Okay? So what is another way I could represent loneliness? Well, let's see. Maybe one dot in the middle. Maybe that's enough, right? One dot in the middle, all alone. Loneliness tends to mean that you feel left out. So maybe this isn't the best idea, but however, it still does translate the concept of loneliness, is that just one simple dot, right? You could also do something along the lines of, maybe you have all these big circles, and then you have a little one in the middle, leaving that person out, and maybe that's the person that's different. Not to say that being different is bad, but that could also represent loneliness. Okay. Crowded. So you can use circles again. You can use squares, triangles, whatever you want. So crowded, the first one that comes to my mind is just things everywhere, filling up that entire circle, almost getting uncomfortably close to each other. So I'm just clicking away here, creating my circles, right? So maybe that's crowded. Another way you can do it that's a little more illustrative. Let me just erase these. So I have crowded. Maybe I draw a line, leave a space, and draw another line. And I have a bunch of dots over here. And it's kind of like overflowing. They're trying to fight to get out because it's so crowded on this one side, right? So that would be another way I could illustrate crowded. Okay. So again, I'm just giving you examples. It's a little strange right now because normally I'd be asking questions. I'd be asking people to come up to the board and illustrate what they would think. But I'm just trying to give you a general idea of what I'm expecting. Again, simple shapes. Thin. Right? It's always good for, whenever you're creating something to do kind of like a comparison. So instead of, if I just put one, hold on, brush. If I just put one line going down the middle, yes, that looks like a thin line, but how do I really know, right? It also can be confusing because that line could kind of create two shapes right here, two rectangles. So it also helps to use things that maybe don't relate to the word necessarily. So if I have one thin line, maybe creating two thicker lines helps to show that comparison. Oops. Right, so now I have the two thick lines and a thin one. So that's a little bit easier as well. You could also represent thin like this if you wanted to. You could have like a kind of like a squiggly shape. And then have it get really thin at one part and then back out, right? And then you color in this area. So that would be another way you could represent thin. I'm not going to be a stickler about what they look like as long as I see that there was some thought. Obviously, if it's, if your word's crowded and you kind of just scribble all around and it's outside the box and it looks completely sloppy, then that's when I'm going to take points off. But if I look at your illustration and I'm not necessarily getting it, but maybe if you were there to describe it, it would help. That's one way to do it too. And maybe we could set something else up to kind of describe what we were doing as well. Inflated. So the first thing that comes to my mind when I think of inflated is a balloon. Remember, we're not drawing objects, but a balloon is also a type of shape, right? So if I'm thinking of inflated, you could do something like this, where it's inflating up, right? And then I would color this in to represent that this is being blown up. Also, inflated could be similar to that shape I drew over here, where going up, getting wide on the sides, right? Inflated, kind of like that. So that's the assignment. I know it might be a little tricky. However, I think we'll be able to manage. Just remember, you're taking a word, and then you're going to do a simple, very simple illustration using simple shapes to represent that word. Let me see if I could think of a word on the spot right here. So we have loneliness, crowded, thin, and inflated, so I don't want to see anyone doing that. What if, I can do sharp? Say if my word was sharp, and you can be as literal as you want, and that's pretty literal. So if my word was, I'm going to plug in my pen, see if it's going to work again, because it's much easier. But it was being very laggy earlier. Doesn't seem to want to be working. Brush. Yes, it's still being very slow, so I'm not going to use that. Oh boy. Alright, so if my word was sharp, I'm going to spell the best I can with my mouse here, S-H-A-R-P. So if my word was sharp, simple shapes, again, they They don't have to be geometric shapes, so shapes with names. You can create a shape yourself. So, you know, do a cool design within this box that has sharp edges, right? So I could do something like this. Kind of look like they're icicles coming down. Okay, and as I was doing this, another word that could possibly represent this in my mind right now, maybe if I was to switch this upside down, so say if I'm going off the same type of illustration and I was to do the similar something like that, I'm getting the sense of fire right now as well. So that my word could be fire. Right? So sharp and fire could have the same thing. And that's, you know, that's okay. I don't want you to be writing the name next to the box and then drawing the box. I'm just doing this so you can see it better on the computer screen. Just write the word either underneath or on top and maybe draw an arrow. So maybe the word sharp is written down here. Pretend that that's sharp and just draw an arrow up. That way I know that this letter, this word goes with this illustration, and then the next word over here, maybe if I used fire, that would go up here, okay? Another word, just for the sake of more practice and hopefully some better understanding from all of you. Let me just erase this. Imagine if my word was wavy. Okay? So, get to my brush. So if my word is W-A-V-Y, can't really say wavy. You could also do, just playing off this kind of like sharp feel, is kind of waves going up. Okay, so the words that you're going to use are words that are descriptive verbs. So like mountain, you wouldn't want to use the word mountain because that's an actual object, right? Wavy isn't an actual object. It's a word that you use to describe something, okay? So that's another important piece of this assignment as well. You know, fire technically wouldn't be a good word to use either, but hot would be a good word to use, okay? So that's a good example right there. Hot instead of fire, because fire is an actual thing, as where hot is a descriptive word. Loneliness is, you know, someone can be lonely. That's not necessarily, you're saying, hey, look at loneliness over there. It's not a real person. It's just how a person feels, okay? Thin is also a descriptive word because, you know, the pencil can be thin, the noodle can be thin, you know, that's a descriptive word. You know, I shouldn't see words like street because that is, then I'll get the feeling that you're just drawing a street instead of creating a word. So like I said, I'm going to create a list of words that you can choose from. That way we kind of limit the mistakes on choosing the words, like I did with fire and hot. And then you're just going to create 6 illustrations in these boxes, or you can just use a piece of paper, draw the boxes yourself, that's fine. You're going to create 6 illustrations from 6 different words, and I would also like for you to add color, okay? So say if this was, you know, if I use the word sharp right here, maybe a blue would be a good color for me to add. You know, I could add blue here on this side, and maybe I could use light blue over here. Now, if I was using the same illustration for hot, then obviously blue probably wouldn't be the best because when you see blue things, you don't necessarily think of hot. Orange, red would be a good color to use, okay? For things like lonely, you know, maybe, obviously, so say I'm going to practice lonely over here, all right? Maybe just because it's plain white, that could be very boring, obviously, and I don't want the things to be boring. So maybe you can just take, you know, whatever color you want, color in the background. You know, that background can be blue, and then instead of having just a black and white version of Lonely, you have a blue, excuse me, go back to brush. You have a blue and yellow version of Lonely, right? Ugh, gotta move my layers down, sorry. It's because I'm using blue. So, Lonely. So that way I'm still using color, but at the same time it's not just, you know, white. And another way you could do that is maybe, you know, the benefits of using color is, say if I hide all of this, let me just add a new layer, don't worry about what I'm doing right here. So say, you know, you don't want to color in that whole background, but you still want to represent Lonely. Maybe you have a whole bunch of circles that are one color, and then one circle that's a different color. So it's kind of sticking out and representing that lonely feeling. So I hope that's okay. Okay, demonstration. It's a simple assignment. It's not going to be graded as a project or anything. Just going to be a classwork grade. If you do have questions, please just, you know, message me on Google Classroom. That way I can see them and just comment right back, and you could see what the question was, and then you can see the answer, and we can go back and forth that way. I'm hoping that this demonstration was easy enough to follow. I will be doing more like this, and I also will be doing videos where you can see me and you can see my hands and see what I'm drawing, because obviously when we go to the project, that's what you'll be doing. So if you have any questions with this, let me know. I'm going to create the list right now and post that on Google Classroom. So you could watch the video, check out the list, and then get started on these. And remember, a total of six big squares at the end using 6 different words. Alrighty, everybody.